Hello, I'm Greenbrier Almond, and this is one of our cats in our home. So this is Boots. You may tell by his white paws. We are talking today about this opportunity that Artistry on Main has given to each of the artists to talk about our craft. Today I'm talking about creative writing, and I really welcome this opportunity. I want to tell you where creative writing has taken us with Artistry on Main. We now have 9 books available in Artistry on Main, and I want to just briefly describe them to you, and then I'll talk about the creative writing process and share a sample of creative writing for this little demonstration today. The first book that got me started and my family started was my father, Dr. Harold Almond, who was a country doctor and did everything. He delivered the babies, he did surgeries, he made house calls, he had office hours Saturday and covered the ER, he did everything. And so his book and his stories are very fascinating to people, and this has become a bestseller with McLean Printing of Parsons putting this book out. And of course my father's been gone now for about 20 years. And it still sells like hotcakes, and you would enjoy, anyone would enjoy reading about doctors when they did everything and when they didn't worry about money and all of that. So this is a creative writing endeavor of my father. I'll tell you one brief story. When Dad was alive, the dean of the medical school at West Virginia University, Dr. D'Alexandra, would have Dad up in the fall, and the new classes would be coming together. And he would tell them as they assembled in the assembly hall, some 400 students of all the disciplines, he'd say, in the next 3 years, 4 years, a dozen years, you're going to learn a lot about the scientific basis of medicine, but I'm going to have Dr. Almond tell you 3 of his stories. And you'll never learn any more about the caring part of medicine than you will hear from Dr. Almond today. And of course, Dad received a wonderful reception. He read 3 stories, and then he would be signing books, and his 400 books would go fast. So this is what we do. This got me interested in creative writing, to see what Dad could do and what every doctor can do. We have a story every day that we can tell. Well, time passed, and I had a TV show, and by the way, I thank Dennis Cordes for helping us film today, but Dennis and others have run a studio in town, an educational TV channel, Channel 3, for a number of years, and I was on for 39 years. And so my father was a guest for 55 times, and after he passed away, I realized there were a lot of stories that he told that he didn't put in his book. So I have 77 of Dad's stories in this book. We call it Tender Loving Care, Stories of a West Virginia Doctor. And the TV program was called Tender Loving Care. People who have read both books find it they're equally interesting, and I've tried to be true, of course, to Dad and his storytelling. And once in a while there's a story he repeats, and that's okay because he makes a different point with each time he tells a story. And he's a master storyteller. Then time passed, and I was about 6 years out when I wrote the book of Dad's stories. But then I thought, well, we were raised in a certain way. My parents, Lois and Harold Almond, raised us in 4-H, in the church, in a stable community, a family that always had dinner, supper together. And so I was talking to Craig Preaser one day about how we were raised, and Craig agreed that he was raised the same way. In fact, he said something that has stuck in me. He said, you know, I was never given a lecture about how I should grow up and be a good man, and he's an outstanding 4-H agent here in our county. He said, we learned everything around the supper table. And I agree. That was a big deal for me. So I wrote Stories of a West Virginia Doctor's Son, and I've had Helen Rigger who's just turned 99 in our community. She was the first public kindergarten teacher in West Virginia. In 1976, she was the Teacher of the Year in the state of West Virginia. And so she wrote the foreword, and she helped me assemble stories how children should be raised or could be raised or how they were raised in the past eras. Then we started having grandchildren. My grandchildren are now 8 years old, and the urge to write was to record for them. So I have stories of a West Virginia doctor for his grandchildren. Many, many stories, again, of doctoring and other activities, traditions, the Strawberry Festival, things of this nature in our community. And stories kept coming. People started telling me stories, and we began to have writing workshops, as I'm going to describe how we do this at Artistry on Main in a minute. But we had stories of a West Virginia doctor for kith and kin. We're Scottish in our mountains here, Scotch-Irish, and kith and kin, of course, are old terms for family and friends. My sisters got involved. I have 4 sisters, and they're outstanding people, and they wanted to write about the West Virginia family. And so all of us together took 8 topics and wrote from all 5 perspectives. For example, what was Main Street like? And we're trying to make it a vibrant Main Street, and so we wrote about that. What was making a house call with our father? What was that like? And what was it like to garden and take a hike and so forth? And a very fascinating book of stories. Well, my wife, not to be outdone, Dr. Gannon, people knew her in town. My father was Dr. Almond, my wife was Dr. Gannon, and I was just called Dr. Greenbrier because we had 3 Almonds in town practicing medicine. Well, Dr. Gannon has written a story, a Coming to America story. There are 8 billion people on Earth, approximately, and there's probably a billion young women who would like to come to America from Asia, as my wife did from the Philippines. And so I'm sure that someday this book will be discovered and it will be a very valuable resource for women and men who want to come to America. America is a great country, and this is a very wonderful book. Brett Baer, who has CNN or Fox News, he has a news program at 6 o'clock in the evening. He read the book and he said, "This lady is authentic." And I think that she will be interviewed someday by Brett Baer. But whether that happens or not, that's okay. That's beside the point. It's a fascinating book, God's Boot Camp. Well, the stories keep happening, and we now have more stories of a West Virginia doctor. And so that is what that's about. But also our whole community has become a community of storytellers. So the Upshur Arts Alliance has put out a book on the occasion of our 200th birthday here in Buchanan. And this is Our Town, Our Stories. We have 24 authors writing stories. And it's fascinating to see the perspective. And this brings me to talking about what I want to see happening here with Artistry on Main. I want to have more creative writing classes. We've had several already, and these are usually over a 2-day period, and usually 10 authors or wannabe authors or future authors coming together who feel that they have a story to tell and they just want to get it out and get the format. We get together over a couple of days, maybe 4-hour sessions, maybe 10 people, maybe 15, and so everyone writes a story. Say, take an instance like eating a piece of chocolate and describing what it's like. What's the texture? What's the taste? What's the surprise inside, if it's a cherry or whatever it may be inside? And so we write for 15 minutes and then share what we've written. That may be inconsequential, but it gets us going. It gets the creative juices going. Then we begin to talk about other things that we can write about in common, and then we share back and forth and give each other, critique each other in a friendly way. At the end of a couple of days, we will have 30, 40, 50, 80 stories. We don't know everyone contributing, and we go along in a cycle of writing stories and then reading our stories. Not worried about spelling, not worried about grammar, but just getting the story out. Making it bleed, as they say, as authors say. You want it to be an emotionally touching story or a high moment story that people will identify with. And so we will put the stories together. For example, there's some 25 schools in our county that have closed over the years. Folks who went to those one-room schools and two-room schools are still alive. And I'm asking them to contribute a story of what it's like to go to that school. And that will be a great book. We could write the story. We've had 77, 79 or so strawberry festivals. We could write about that over the years. And these will be great things that we do in our creative writing class. But I have a few minutes, and I want to take time to talk about a story and just show you how a story might come together. This is being recorded just after Memorial Day in 2020. Pandemic era, unusual time for us. And I grew up with a class of 1966, the height of the Vietnam War, and some of my friends went off to war, some did not come home. And so I write a Memorial Day story. I would like to share this with you with the idea that not this is the greatest story in the world, but just to show you that it's a type of story that I believe anyone could write, and I think all of us should be recording. So this is just called Koinonia. Koinonia has to do with relationship and connection, and this is a Memorial Day eulogy. The Greek word for fellowship, as recorded in Acts in the Bible, the second chapter, the 42nd verse, is koinonia and carries the meaning of participation or sharing. In the Bible, believers participated in shared identity and spirituality. They were learning spiritual truths, they were devoting themselves to fellowship, they were remembering Jesus' death, depending on God, experiencing His power, and showing extravagant acts of generosity towards the needy. Surely a prime example of participation and sharing are our school days in our mountaineer community in the Central Appalachians. Each year, around Memorial Day, especially for the past 10 years, as I've been serving as an elected member of the Upshur County School Board of Education, I'm acutely aware of the Buchanan Upshur High School graduation. The intense feeling surrounding this mountaintop experience ranks as one of the greatest moments of many Upshurites' life. I get to sit on the stage and see the tears of joy flow and see the smiles ear to ear. The sheer ecstasy of graduation gives me goosebumps. Students who began in kindergarten or even pre-K are now recognizing life's path will divide after graduation. Some vow patriotically to continue together by selecting military service. This is a proud tradition in our mountains. I get a lump in my throat and a tear in my eye when I recall our Buchanan Upshur class of 1966, President Steve Brown, reminding us at the height of the Vietnam War that there was no need for a draft of our class members in our community. The full quota and more came from volunteer ranks. 150 young men joined. 150 young women waited and prayed. Now, more than additional training is required today and for people to be employed. So some kids, even today, as they graduate, they'll go off to college, to the same college, or they'll go to a technical school. Yes, some sweethearts, childhood sweethearts in each class will marry right after graduation. And so the wedding bells will chime. Rasley and I both met as doctors, but we shared medical practice and we shared our marriage, and how sweet that is. Friends growing up together know each other profoundly. We are like peas in a pod. The early death of such a deep friend leaves a hole in our hearts that can never be filled. On Memorial Day, when we honor our fallen soldiers, I choose to devote my thoughts to such friends, whom I can scarcely go one day without grieving for my fallen brothers. Fred is such a person. Lance Corporal Fred Michael Kearns, 1948 to 1969. Fred, the son of Fred D. Kearns and Thelma Kearns, originally of Elkins, West Virginia, and Buchanan when we were growing up, died on the 29th of July, 1969, 20 years of age, in Quang Nam, Vietnam. Our relationship remains frozen in time from the moment I heard of Fred's death in a helicopter crash into a rice paddy on the other side of the world. Fred signed up for a second tour, inspired by his volunteer work with local orphans during his off-duty hours. Otherwise, he may have been able to return home. He dreamed of adopting a child from that jungle nation that he defended with his life. What I feel is koinonia, the Greek term, intense fellowship, biblical, which I cherish so much. How much? Well, there's 8 billion humans on Earth, and I'm one of the rare people that have never left the community of my birth. How rich that life experience that is here in the mountains. During that valued youth, as I was growing up with Fred, I sat under an apple tree at 4-H camp in our 16th summer, charting our life course. He who knew and loved me said I was quixotic. My, what a thing to say to a friend. The word quixotic comes from the ambitious and head in the clouds type of person, Don Quixote, of the legendary Spanish novel by Miguel de Cervantes. Yet it fits me, perhaps because Fred said I was quixotic. I aspired to be the type of person he told me I was. My strong shared identity with my spiritual soulmate for the past 56 years has shaped my every thought and my every choice, yea, these many years. How could I best honor Fred's observation except by long joining together my deeply held desire with his? We are forever bonded in koinonia. So that is the story. And this is what we do in writing class. And we would write something like this and then we would share it with each other. And it's a beautiful experience. I appreciate this opportunity, and I want to conclude with this thought, that we have the opportunity to have Artistry on Main. And we have all sorts of artists, but we have writing as part of that, creative writing as part of that. I've mentioned to you that we now have a collection of 24 authors, Our Town, Our Stories. We can do more stories about Buchanan, for sure. We could write about schools. We could write about occasions like Memorial Day, Independence Day, Christmas, you know, on and on and on. So I hope that you will listen to this as you are, that you will buy the books that are already out there, and we will go ahead and have a chance to continue creative writing. My final thought really is that I enjoyed the practice of medicine for nearly 50 years, and now it has been 50 years, and I have retired from that, but the Chamber of Commerce has me listed as a historian. And it's not because I am a historian, but I have become one because of creative writing. You may have that itch to write inside of you, and I hope that I can help you scratch that itch. Thank you.